One of the downsides of doing most of my videos outdoors is that I'll have these memory lapses when I'm talking about a subject. And such is the case with the Manic Street Preachers video I did a couple weeks ago. It was supposed to be about Lifeblood 20, but I really didn't talk too much about it. I think my conclusion was it's cold and it reminds me of Grace Under Pressure. Didn't even mention anything about the songs. There's some great songs on there. Lover Richard Nixon pops out. Ocean Spray. I think that the lyrical part of Ocean Spray is what makes it endearing. The song itself, I'm kind of iffy on, but there is some good stuff on there. And if you haven't given it a listen in a while or at all, it's definitely worth investigating. What I left out that I had to make this about was I mentioned the whole Richie thing briefly, but one thing I didn't mention was A Journal for Plague Lovers. This is an album that came out in 2009. It was recorded with Steve Albini, and the idea behind this album is that they used all Richie's lyrics on it. Before he disappeared, like shortly before, he left them a notebook. I guess he gave one to each of the guys or something like this, like each a set of lyrical ideas with titles. Like there's a lot of stuff in there that's kind of or there was in this folder that scattered pictures, all different kind of things, but he did have pieces that looked like they were ready to be songs. They had titles and everything else. The folder itself was called Opulence. It had a picture of, I think, Bugs Bunny on the front, and I don't know what Opulence has to do with anything, but he gave them this shortly before he disappeared, and I think his intention was probably here. This is something you can do something with. And the album they made after he disappeared, Everything Must Go, included some lyrics that they had been working on prior to that album with Richie that they weren't, I don't think they were part of the Opulence folder. The Opulence folder was looked into later, but in any case, they sat on these lyrics for a long time. Nicky Wire said he didn't feel right about looking at them, or just didn't want to look at them or go through them, and it was James who started looking through it and said, hey, this would be good to, if we took these lyrics, the last thing he gave us, and make an album out of them. There was some resistance in the band, I think mainly from Nicky, because he had felt at that time in the band's history, they had just pretty much made a commercial and critical comeback with their 2007 album, Send Away the Tigers. They'd gone through kind of a slower point in the early 2000s in a commercial and also critical sense, where to many it seemed like they'd kind of fallen off. And Send Away the Tigers was kind of a return to form for them. I like the album. It is a little bit like Manic's music we have loved before kind of release. It's not bad. It's just, it's I like it. But anyway, it was a return to form as far as the charts and awareness, and put them back on the map. And he didn't want to screw that up. The Manics famously, usually they'll put out like a more commercial album, then they follow it with something confounding, or the opposite of what they did before. A lot of times a record with them is a rebuke of the last one almost, and Nicky felt that they had got back on track, and he didn't want to squander that by releasing this thing with Richie's lyrics. And it would obviously, be looked at like a continuation of the Holy Bible in some way, and it, you know, probably wouldn't be the kind of feel-good commercial album that they thought would be the better option. They did make that album following Journal for Plague Lovers, but Journal for Plague Lovers, the entire record is made up of Richie's lyrics, and the lyrics a lot of times in the band kind of drive the music as far as like the type of music, and I guess he left a lot of little things in this folder that kind of led them toward the kind of musical aesthetic of what he was kind of going for or thinking of. And indeed, it does sound like the Holy Bible, but not, it's not as angry. It's more, there's a lot more resigned cynicism, maybe. There's a little bit of dark humor in it. Musically, it's not as harsh. It's still loud and raw. Steve Albini produced it. They got him because Richie loved Steve's work on In Utero. At the time before he disappeared, when discussing a new album that would be the follow-up to Holy Bible, Richie had said he wanted, and he was kind of the band leader. I mean, he dictated policy as far as direction, aesthetics. The music was largely driven by him. He would give, and I don't know how this process works, but he would give the lyrics to James, and James and Sean would then write the music. I don't know if that meant they would start from a page one type of situation where they just got the lyrics and go from there, or they would jam up pieces of music that they had previously and then marry them to his lyrics. I don't know that process at all, and I don't think I've seen them talk too much about the actual mechanics of that. But at any rate, his lyrics kind of drove the direction a lot of times. So with using his lyrics, it was definitely going to be darker and edgier than the things he had been doing previously. It seems like they were flailing for a direction at this period too, prior to Send Away the Tigers. The early 2000s, they seem to be careening back and forth between them. All right, what do we do? I liked the albums. I don't think they've ever made a bad one, but it seemed like they were lost a little bit. And when Send Away the Tigers, what they did with that was kind of pull from their past and get all the things people liked about them. I don't know if this is consciously or subconsciously, and they released a real crowd-pleasing kind of album. But prior to that, it seemed like they were just kind of lost. And I think doing Journal for Plague Lovers was kind of the reset they needed to keep moving on from that era. Now, they've never really milked the Richie thing or cashed in on it. Most of the attention it gets is from people outside the band. I mean, there's about 100 YouTube videos, podcasts of people discussing Richie's disappearance, sometimes barely even mentioning the group. But they themselves have never kind of cashed in on it. They have a light touch on it in the way, you know, maybe Pink Floyd does on Syd Barrett. It's a very similar situation where a lot of the mythologizing is done by fans and journalists and critics. They bring up the Syd Barrett thing with Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd, some of his music is related, as you know, famously "Wish You Were Here," and it does inform a lot of The Wall and things like that, as well as Roger's situation with his father. But they don't really use that. They don't sell out with that. Like, hey, you know, and Manics were wary of that. They didn't want it to look like that's what they were doing. And I think it was done respectfully when they first called Steve Albini about it. He hadn't really no knowledge of the band, as does most Americans. It's so weird how such a band that's so huge and mainstream in other parts of the world can be virtually unknown here. It's kind of odd. It's almost like akin to an alternate reality. like a world where, you know, these guys are household names. And over here, no one knows all of them. But Steve said he was really touched by the idea of taking Richie's lyrics and doing this thing for their friend, you know. And he said he was on board at the pitch, you know. He went on to say they were great to work with, funny, pleasant, you know, easy to get along with, no problems. Now, for Steve personally, he said his head was a bit not in the game because he's going through a divorce, I think, at the time, something like that. But he loved the experience of working with them, and it sounds so good. That thing sounds so good. With me, Albini's hit and miss, personally. Like, sometimes it feels like no one showed up, you know, to do production work. His drums are always great. And I guess Sean was really happy about that because he gave him a lot more attention than he normally gets recording for Manic. But the album itself is amazing. One of the best, I think, and one of my favorites from them. Every song is good. It's one of those albums that you put on, maybe you might want to hear one song, but then when the next one starts, like, oh, I love this too. Oh yeah, I love this too. It's one of those kind of albums. If I had to say, I don't know, would it be their second best? I think their best is the Holy Bible. Even though when it came out, I just didn't get it. It was too weird for me, especially after Gold Against the Soul, which I liked more because it was more traditional. So I wasn't into the Holy Bible at first, but I've come to recognize what it is and enjoy it a lot. Probably, and again, it's probably my favorite one of their albums. So Journal for Plague Lovers is probably number 2. I mean, you know, it's kind of one of those things of what could have been. Like, imagine if that guy stayed with them, writing lyrics and steering the ship. Like, my God, what could they have done? But in the same idea, I guess many in the band, there's only 3 of them, Nikki and James were both saying after the Holy Bible they didn't know if they were going to be able to continue making this style of music, the very harsh, the very harsh sounds. And like I said, Richie, his idea for the next album after Holy Bible would be a mix between Pantera, Nine Inch Nails, and Screamadelica. That's what he was saying he wanted the next album to be. So it would look like it was going to continue in that direction, but lyrically, these lyrics came after the Holy Bible ones, and they're a bit more resigned, they're not as angry. They're still great. You know, the things he connects, it's very internet. Like, and this is pre-internet times, it's very hot link. Like, he'll connect all these really disparate parts. You know, singing about giant haystacks with 100,000 people in Bombay, which actually did happen. He was huge over there, and 100,000 people did see him. And yeah, that's a crazy story. But he'll marry stuff like that with other authors, psychologists. His brain was everywhere, and he's tying all these things together. And like I think all music and bands, when the way it works, or at least it used to with me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, is you put in a bunch of different stuff into the blender, and then you turn the blender on, and whatever comes out is usually uniquely yours. But you take a lot of things from out there, from the ether, and he certainly was. He had things saved from magazines, just regular mainstream magazines, maybe Q. Did they have Vanity Fair over there? Stuff like that, interviews with prominent figures or celebrities or things, and he would clip these little newspaper clippings or write things down, and this stuff just all would come together, kind of like it's like a alchemical process. It's magic, absolutely. So the album, they did no singles from it, and I think the reason, I mean, they gave, like, well, we want to be looked at as a whole piece and everything. I think they didn't want to ruin their run, because they had returned to the charts and were getting singles again, you know, that were doing well. So much like how they were afraid to record the album to stop their return to commercial prominence, I think they felt, shit, we can't put out a flop single now, or we'll be back to square one. I think Jackie Collins could have been, they did a video for that. That could have been something that got on radio. This was not nearly as harsh as the Holy Bible. Like the Holy Bible, a lot of that stuff was just too noisy to make regular radio rotation, I think. This, despite being produced by Steve Albini, I think this was a lot more radio friendly. They definitely could have did singles from this. Now, would they have charted well and continued the streak they started with Send Away the Tigers? Who knows? I think that was the fear. You know, I didn't want to... And they did go right into producing another album that was more in line with what they wanted to do. Post Send Away the Tigers, an album, Postcards from a Young Man, which is, you know, it's alright. I don't like that album that much. It's good. I mean, like I said, they never made like a bad one in my estimation, but it's a bit, it's hard to say by the numbers because there really is no numbers for this band. They're always a little bit different, but it was a little bit safe, I guess. But Journal for Plague Lovers is excellent. There's a lot of highlights on it, almost every song. The titles, you know, it's crazy, like the Holy Bible type titles, and there's like they have titles that don't really appear in the song, things like Peeled Apples, and a lot of the tracks have an intro of dialogue, much like the Holy Bible did. The spelling on the front is the same as the Holy Bible, the way they spell the name of the band. It has a Jenny Saville painting on the front, like the Holy Bible did as well. So it has a lot of thematic ties to it. Yeah, it just, every song, you know, is great on this thing. And it's 13 tracks, but it's kind of breezy. It's not, it doesn't feel like 13 tracks. I listened to it the other day, like twice in a row. Because to me it was like, oh, it's over? That's it? So I gave it the listen a couple times to refresh myself on it. Again, like I complained about in the beginning, or talked about in the beginning, when you're out here doing videos outside, it's hard to recall things, especially like song titles. But I'll put my favorite ones up on the Don't Hit Me Lady. Oh, those people on those micro machines, man. Some of them zip around here really fast. It's dangerous. But yeah, Journal for Plague Lovers, I overlooked that whole thing the other day when I was doing the Manic's video, and it definitely is an important part of the whole story, because they, you know, they kind of put the cap on it, and I think it's great that they resisted as long as they did with using them, because the temptation is there. You know, it would get interest. What's up, man? How you doing? It would definitely get interest from fans to hear about, you know, they're using the lyrics of Richie again, and it's like a cheat button. It's like a, you know what I mean? Like, and the fact that they resisted doing that for so long, I think is great, and I think that was absolutely the right time, and it's a great album. You can check it out, Journal for Plague Lovers. Okay, now we're at Long Strugs, so I have to go in there and meander around with the rest of the old people. Till next time, don't blame the teacher, blame the school.